Well, welcome to the Jacob Sheriff podcast. Today's topic is going to be what's our responsibility to the next generation? As a fellow parent in this journey, I have a lot of things that I've been wrestling out with Jesus about. How do I put in my children what is needed and to equip them for what world they're in the midst of? And so, we're going to wrestle out all different sorts of thoughts today. I'm excited about this topic.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again for the podcast. This topic, I think, is super important. And it's a responsibility that we all share towards the next generation. So no matter what your specific situation, whether you're a parent, whether you're single, whether you're maybe in a broken marriage or a broken home, or like, none of this stuff is prescriptive, but we can all agree together that we have an obligation and a responsibility to build and to lay a foundation for the next generation to build upon. And so before we get into that today, please let us know that you're listening. Share this, like this, comment on this. I get bored hearing myself say to do the same things every week. So if you just take the action and do them, you won't have to hear me say them every single time. I don't know, that's not true. I might keep saying it. But before we get into that topic today, a pseudo-related fun question. What is something that your kids do that make you feel like, man, this is awesome to be a parent? So usually I go with something a little funny, or like, this is maybe a little bit more feel good. And like, what is something, what's a story of something one of your kids have done that's like, being a parent's awesome?
Anytime unprodded, one of my kids just come up and hug and say, "I love you, Dad." that always makes me, like, even if I was upset or mad, I'm just like, oh, there's the heart melting.
Yep.
And we got one of our kids, my youngest daughter. She does it the most. All of them do it, but she does it the most. And it has kept my heart soft towards her. But really, one of the best moments was, I might have told this story on the podcast before, but I was driving with my two oldest, who are 11 and 9 at the time. And my 11-year-old daughter, we were talking about education in school and, what they want to be when they grow up and what kind of education will be necessary to fulfill that. And so my daughter is, she's between a veterinarian and a ophthalmologist, which is the baby doctor, like caring for babies. And anyway, so I'm like, oh, sweetie, okay, that's fantastic. That's a lot of education. So if you hate school, you're going to hate it for a long time. And my son, my 9-year-old son, pops up in the back. And man, I can't lose the details of the story because it's so great. But he was like, hey, you know that kind of job where, like, you work with someone and you learn what they do? And I was like, yeah, bud, that's an apprentice. He's like, yeah, an apprentice. Dad, since I'm going to be a pastor, can I be your apprentice? So I was like, absolutely, bud. Yep. Absolutely. You can be my apprentice. That was one of those that's like, being a dad is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Hannah?
Man, I think, I don't know if I have a cool story like that, but just whenever I like come home or I have been outside and come back inside, our youngest runs and greets me as if I've been gone for years, and then he goes evangelizing, telling everybody that Mom is back in the room. That makes me feel,
Mom, Daddy, Mom's here.
Be sad the day that stops,
Yeah.
And then there's just certain things that I know that when they're asking for time, they know that whatever they're going through, this time will make things right. Yeah. And I would say that's pretty cool. That makes me feel good as a mom.
So I love it when I see the dots connect for my kids and unprompted, something that I've felt like I've had to drill into them. They finally sort of like come to that.
It's like the light bulb moment.
Yeah. It's like they come to that spot on their own.
Yeah.
So like recently Ellie got back from camp and it was really sweet. She just was getting close to bedtime and she just came to me and she's like, she had her Bible with her and she's like, Dad, what's a good scripture for when you feel scared at night? And I'm like, this is awesome. My kid isn't just like asking me for a cool verse. She's like recognizing that like scripture is a solution to fear.
Yeah.
Like knowing the truth is a way to not be afraid. Yeah. And so I was able to share Psalm 91 with her and we prayed through it that night. And I told her like, that was something I learned from my dad. Yeah. That, he would pray that with us consistently when we were young and when we would feel afraid. And that was like the go-to truth that I would go, she has an active imagination. And so she would, she told me, she's like, sometimes I think about things that are scary, like, somebody being outside my window when I'm sleeping or things like that are just scary, and she is just asking like, what do I need to think of or what do I need to know to not think of those things? Yeah. And so that's anyway, really cool. Little moments like that, and then, right before then and right after then, we were dealing with just normal bedtime drama, but just like a little moment of like, hey, Dad, what do I do in this situation? And needing some wisdom. Yeah. Those moments are precious and they, when they come, if I'm paying attention, like that's just that reminder of like, you know what, the best thing I get to do is be a dad. Yeah. Career, calling, all of the different things that we engage with as adults that try to add meaning and value to our life. Like there's something powerful about getting to be a dad to those three girls, it's just, it just makes my life important. Yeah. At least to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to kind of frame the topic today, none of us claim to be experts. I mean, we're in the middle of this, raising kids. I have among us, I'm the only one with a teenager, but she's only 13. And so I'm even new at that season. So none of these things that we're going to talk about is like, hey, here's the formula for how you raise kids. Like, I mean, we're still in the middle of this, but what we do want to talk about is like the importance of parenting that next generation, the importance of what it means, even from a spiritual perspective, to take responsibility for the raising and the nurturing of that next generation. In an individual way, we're responsible for raising our own families and our own kids, but even as a group, our generation is responsible to the next generation. Yeah. And carrying on the truth that we've been given, learning from our parents' wins and our parents' mistakes, learning and advancing the kingdom of God generationally, not just temporarily. Yeah. So having that generational perspective. So Hannah, I want you to kick us off today. How has this topic been? You've been meditating on this. You even just came off recently a week of being a counselor at camp. Yeah. How is this weighing on your heart right now, Miss Feeler?
Yes. I think that, man, raising our 5 kids, and again, thank you for clarifying that we're no experts at any of this. This is just the world we're in. And so obviously it's on my mind a lot, and coming out of camp and being able to be in a place of leading, my cabin girls in experiences with the Lord and all of those sorts of things, and seeing that, man, we're all given influence. And what are we doing with that influence? We're given influence when you have your own children. I mean, you do day in and day out with them. I think there's even influence when you're in situations, temporary moments like a camp experience where you have an opportunity to really partner with Holy Spirit on how to steward those moments. And so, this came to me as I began thinking about what are the giants of this generation and how am I equipping my children in truth to be able to discern truth, but also what are the things, what are the words, the common threads of things going on, and recognizing that this isn't just a temporary assignment, but I must be vigilant in this time and must be intentional. And I say must be because I desire, going back to another question you had in another podcast, like what's at stake if I don't? Mm-hmm. And this is in no ways to be condemning or you better do or a bunch of do's and don'ts, but really the difference between answering a call to just fulfilling a moment or an assignment for a temporary time. And I just would love to encourage all listening that no matter if you're in the best moments of parenting or in worst, or maybe you've made a lot of mistakes or you have a lot of regrets, like there's always hope. And in that, God is faithful. And so that's just what's been on my heart is how do I steward what I've been given? How do I recognize the narrative being played, and how do I really equip my kids? I think, our oldest is 11, and thinking about time is so passing so fast. Yeah. And the years that I have left with her, and then one right after that, am I being very vigilant and intentional to put in them what they need to be able to stand and equip them for, raising their own families one day, having a healthy marriage, all of those sorts of things. It's less about changing diapers and more about making sure they're ready for what God's uniquely called them to, but also carrying that mantle for their generation. So I don't know, it's just kind of, there's a heaviness to it. There's a respect for it, but man, I'm journeying in it like all of us. So that's just what I've been thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. The great weight and the great joy that comes with being a dad. Like the first, whenever Alea was born and I held her for the first time, like I could feel it was this simultaneous sense of responsibility and like just joy of like, wow, this is such a gift to have this, this new life placed in my arms, and just the gravity of responsibility to care for her and to look out for her. Those moments, the feelings I had in those moments, in that moment wasn't, it's not that feeling has faded, but walking that out is different than just feeling it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the amount of frustration or the amount of, emotional distress that child would cause me over the years. Like I didn't know at that time, but none of that matters when I compare it to just the joy of seeing her grow up and the joy of seeing who she's becoming and like seeing her lead her sisters and all of the different things that I know God has placed inside of her, and being a part of that journey to see those things unlocked and see her discover those things about herself. And I think there's just so much wrong thinking about the role of fathers and the role of mothers in our culture that is putting the emphasis on the children to figure out who they are, instead of them being parented in a way that helps them discover who God's called them to be. And recognizing that has really just put more of a weight of that calling on on my radar recently. Just like I hear so many different stories of children who are raised in different environments, and like the amount of challenges and things that they have to overcome are just humbling, because my kids have got it so well compared to just even overseas and different. Audrey visited Uganda and seeing the way that that the cultural differences, even in how children are treated and raised and things like that. And then I sit here and I'm looking at my kids who are, turning their nose up at, the fact that there's, pepper on their potatoes or whatever. And I'm like, seriously, kids,
Yes. Yeah.
But we can think of these things in a broad sense, but even just in a practical sense, like, that is what it means to be a dad, is to help my kids navigate life, to prepare them to be adults, and to love them. Yes. To show them affection, to show them, to give them what they need from their dad. But I'm an imperfect, like I'm never going to do that perfectly. And so the best thing I can teach them is how to relate to their Heavenly Father, to relate to Jesus in a way that goes beyond what I'm even able to do. And so I think, just to echo what you were saying, like, none of anything that we're talking about today is to lay a heavy burden on anybody, but to hopefully just empower people to know that, like, this is something that we are called to, but it's something that we're not called to do alone, and that we're able to access grace and lead and parent through the power of the Holy Spirit. And, we've been on that theme for a little while, but Jacob, good. Where's your headspace on this topic? Like, what's been rolling around?
I mean, all over the map on this. It's something I've really, man, just we, as parents, part of why this is, more and more on our minds, Hannah and I, is we have our oldest that's in knocking on the door on teenage, and so we know that that's a threshold of childhood, that her body, her mind is going through changes. Her social context is going through adjustments and changes. The child right under her, our son, is right on her heels with his age, while simultaneously getting our last child potty trained and becoming a child instead of just a toddler. We're transitioning that, and so like a lot of our life when you're raising young kids is just making it through the day, of making sure they're fed, making sure they're changed, making sure that if there's a big fight that we resolve it. I mean, so parenting is different in that season. And so because we're navigating like 2 seasons at once, it's made us really think about it more. But this was something even before we were married that we wanted to have. We talked through and worked through having the right perspective. And that is a calling to be a parent. And many people have kids for many reasons. Some people, it's the unintended consequences of sexual exploration. They want to engage in some kind of activity with another person, and oops, they get pregnant. And so you enter into parenthood like by default. Some people, that was a happy accident. Other people, it's terrifying. It's debilitating. It's actually getting in the way of their dreams. And so if they go ahead and have the child to term and are raising a child, it's almost like this child is a nuisance from conception. Some people struggle to have kids, and that's just what they crave and desire. There's just many things that happen in having children, but in raising them, if we have a child, then we need to decide that this is our calling. I think it's Andy Stanley that says something to the effect of what if the most important thing we do in life is who we raise, not what we accomplish. And I remember thinking before we had kids, like, I was nervous about the world. I see how things are changing in culture and I'm concerned about it. And I don't remember what precipitated it. I know it wasn't just my own head. I know someone said something. Maybe it was a sermon I was listening to or something, but I know I internalized, man, I don't know if I can change the world myself. I don't know if I can change the world for my kids, but I can raise my kids in such a way that they can change their world. Mm-hmm. And so it's like I internalized this idea, the world needs my kids. And that made me take fathering seriously, not as a natural progression in adulthood. You know, the natural progression of graduate school, then go to college and graduate college and get a career. And after a career, get married and build and then have kids and then buy a home. And then kind of just this American adulthood progression. It's not hard to just stumble into all that. But truly deciding when we have kids, we're going to raise them as disciples of the Lord Jesus. We're going to be intentional about their raising. This isn't just incidental to our life. Mm-hmm. And that then keeps us on our toes with what's going on right now. And I've tried to really understand culture. Like, if you can't get a culture moving in the right direction if you don't understand how it got there. And there is this tension when it comes to raising children of the role of the parents and the role of the community. You can't disconnect the parent from the children and just society raise a kid. But a parent needs a support, a context. They need an environment that is conducive for their kids. Well, at some point in time, culturally, we decided parents are terrible and the culture needs to raise the kids. And we'll say, like, empower children, like, you know, apparently, you know, you can't vote until you're 18, can't smoke, can't drink till you're 21, but at 3 you can decide your gender.
Right.
Like, that's the insanity we're in right now. Mm-hmm. But we didn't get there overnight. Yeah. This was very much, there's a cultural orthodoxy that now is there to program our children, and parents that are raising them are a threat to that programming. They're indoctrinating them when there's no sense of understanding. Are you hypocrite? Like, that's exactly what you're doing. So it's never been more important that the parents be actively engaged in the raising of our children, because there's also another cultural shift I noticed is the absence of elders. And where I think, just where my mind's been and trying to see, every generation of human history, the next generation had to rely on the previous generation to know how to navigate life, to know how to, run the farm or apprentice a particular vocation. They cannot, the next generation can't make it in the world without their parents. And then the advent of technology has totally destroyed that, to where now, combine that with sitcoms, cultural depictions of parenthood, specifically the fathers, are that we are stupid. Fathers, parents in general, but specifically fathers, are stupid. They're naive. They're self-oriented. They're selfish, and you can pull
clue what's going on.
No clue what's going on. Now, are there plenty of dads that are like that? Oh, absolutely. Way too many. But images and ideas, this is from, if you're really interested in reading a really difficult book, Dallas Willard's most important work, I think, personally, is Renovation of the Heart. And the chapter on the transformation of the mind, he talks about what are thoughts and how do thoughts affect what do thoughts affect? And you talk about how thoughts are how we create reality or ascertain reality. And they're all informed by ideas and images. An idea is abstract, but an image is concrete. And the ideas and images that reinforce one another become ingrained in how our thinking gets solidified. So this was written, I think, 2002 was the publishing date of this, you take the social media, TikTok, the images that we all put in front of our faces, that those images are creating something. It's creating frameworks of our mind to hold on to that's crafting reality for us. So we think about what our children has no concept of reality except what they see, what they experience, what they taste. And so they're seeing YouTube, they're seeing TikTok, they're seeing, and it's creating images in them. It's forming their reality, forming the reality that they're in. And now between sitcoms and then technology, adults are stupid. Kids, I was a young adult at the advent, the advent of the technology age, which is seen to be 2007, with the main Facebook being mainstream and the first iPhone. That's the advent of a new age, the technology age. And I think about it, even when VCRs were in. Who were the ones hooking up the VCRs? Right. It was the kids. It was the kids learning how to program a VCR to record your favorite show. I remember when we got DirecTV for the first time. It was my brother and I figuring out the systems and figuring out the programming. It was my brother and I that set the locks. Right. The adult locks that you have to have a code to unlock certain ratings or whatever. I remember setting it. And when the phones came out, my dad still has to call me and ask me about how to use his phone for something. And what that did is now a child is more apt to navigating the world than the adult. The adult is the stupid one. The child's the smart one. It completely circumvented what the entirety of human history was, that you needed an elder in your life to help you navigate life. Well, that might be true. This flip might be true about technology, that the children are the intelligent ones and the learned ones and the adults are the stupid ones. But what the problem is not when it comes to the technology, the problem is mapping that assumption onto all
everything
of reality.
else.
Right.
Yeah.
And so culturally speaking, there is a very targeted message in our academics, in our entertainment, that is very much children should be autonomous and raise themselves under our guidance. It's enforcing a lie to them. Your parents are stupid. We can tell you what reality is. Adults are bad in general, except this adult who's telling you what this is. And it's dividing our children. And then parents are mostly just clueless. Very few parents are malicious, I think. I mean, there's plenty of parents that are abusive and are malicious. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. And I don't know how many listeners grew up in that kind of abusive home. And so I'm not saying that doesn't exist or that that's rare. It's happening a lot more frequently. The vast majority of parents just are clueless. And that began with latchkey kids of the 80s, where MTV were raising kids. So I'm not talking about the last 10 years. This is as soon as the family became a 2-income household, kids started raising themselves. This was this is the end of Generation X. And now we're living in 30 plus years of that reality. And parents, for the most part, are clueless. So, there's time your kids are crazy, give them a device. That'll quiet them up. You don't know what to do with them, turn on the TV. The TV will entertain them. And I'm not saying that's wrong and that should never happen. I don't know. It might be necessary occasionally. But as a whole, is that our parenting? Well, at that point now, someone else is raising our kids. Right. They're just in our home. And so that's, you said, where's my brain at? Well, this is where my brain's been at. Really trying to understand parenting, because and one of the ways this just totally became surface to me is I was at Walmart, and every weird story starts with that. I was at Walmart and I watched this adult, I'm assuming he was a dad, and his maybe 12-year-old son. So it could have been an uncle and a nephew, could have been maybe a grandparent. You could tell this person was a rough life, and he was vaping inside Walmart with a vape machine. This is happening right in front of me. I'm at the self-checkout, I'm checking out, and he's right across all the gum where I'm looking. I'm maybe 5 feet away. and he's vaping, and then he takes it out of his mouth and gives it to his 12-year-old kid.
Wow.
And the 12-year-old kid did it, and the kid knew what he was doing. Like, it didn't look unfamiliar. He did exactly what you're supposed to do with that, and did it and held it for a while as if this is a common occurrence. And I'm like, and it's like everything inside of me, I don't know what my face said. Thank God he wasn't looking my way, because I probably shot him the dirtiest look. And just in my brain was, are you insane? Mm-hmm. That's common now. Not even 15 years ago, that would have been abuse. Because now, man, teenagers' lungs are being destroyed, not by cigarettes, far worse than cigarettes. What was okay for a long period of time was vaping, was considered okay. Mm-hmm. Kids that are, I've listened to stories of 16-year-old kids that are athletic and in sports having to quit athletics for their entire life because their lungs lack the capacity to just handle everyday activity because of vaping. What would have taken cigarettes 10 years destroyed a kid's lungs in a year.
Wow.
And this is a 12-year-old child who has no self-regulation about any of this stuff. An adult is consciously and willfully sharing that with him. And that just surfaced for me what is just beneath the surface in so many other ways, that I'm sure that person was navigating life exactly like they were trained to navigate life, that this is just part of living. I don't have that great of a life, so part of my enjoyment in life is to vape. I'm not supposed to, have cigarettes, but this must be okay. And it's, well, what's wrong? I should probably give my son this experience too. He needs to enjoy life because he's probably going to have a pitiful life like me. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how many stupid things are going on that as a youth pastor, most of the time when I'm dealing with something in a teenager, I can trace it back to the way they're being parented. And I'm just like, man, teenagers aren't quite as stupid as we think. And they are pretty stupid, but not quite as much as we think. It really, parents, very few of them that I have encountered are willfully malicious in what they're doing. Most of the time, it's just they don't know better. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been having more and more discussions about with our kids. And how do we help parents get a hold of this? That, man, we have such power. If we got to point our kids to Jesus. We got to give them encounters with Jesus.
Yeah. The thing that's been sticking out to me recently that has really been helpful is I had to recognize there was a temptation even as a dad to stop parenting each of my children and to start parenting the kids as a group.
Like a collective.
Yeah. The number of times I'm talking to them and not to each of them individually. Because for whatever reason, I'm trying to shortcut it or whatever. And there are times where I can say, girls, get ready for bed.
Yeah.
And, that is a general instruction that applies to everybody. But what has been really rewarding recently is being intentional about spending time with each one of them on their own, and learning to get to know them individually and not just as the group, of my daughters, so little moments of taking one of them with me somewhere, and then letting them have that single one-on-one time with dad has been super helpful, and the chance for each of them to be one-on-one with me and just ask questions, or it's just so silly, but taking one of them to go get donuts in the morning. I took Ellie most recently because she'd been at camp and I wanted to have some one-on-one time with her. And the chance to have a conversation about what she was feeling and what is she seeing and, hey, what was camp like and things like that. I think the great struggle for our kids' generation is going to be this gap of feeling seen.
Yeah.
Because so much of our so much of our culture is consumed with distractions. Like our kids are distracted, but oftentimes they're needing attention and they're seeking attention from parents who are distracted.
Yeah.
And so the thing that's really been weighing on me is how important it is for me to be present.
Yeah.
Not only to for my own, just mental health and well-being, but to be present to each one of my children so that they aren't being raised by whatever the culture is trying to do. So bouncing off of what Jacob just said about parents being unaware or just clueless, it is so critical that we are present, that we resist the temptation to just be locked into our devices and, just sucked into the cycle of browsing social media. And, all of these things have their uses and they fulfill a purpose, but the majority of our lives can be consumed by things that just are meaningless and just pull us away.
Yeah.
And the amount of parenting that happens in those moments of being present.
Yeah.
Whenever our kids stop becoming a nuisance to us, but in our mind are the thing that we need to be present to and paying attention to. I've just seen so much fruit from being intentional at taking that time to be with each and every one of them and to not necessarily have like a plan or an agenda, but just have open-ended time to just you know what, for now, you and I are together and it's just us and we're just going to go and be, and maybe we do something fun. Maybe we're just going on an errand. Maybe you're just with me in the car and we're not talking, but we're together, and being present like that has made such an impact just even on the way that they relate to each other. There was a time here recently where it was just super busy. The month of April was just super busy and stressful for our for our family at that time. And I just started to notice, even in my girls, just this snippiness and just they weren't getting along with each other like they had been. They were, they tended to bow up against mom and dad whenever we tell them to do something. And the shift that happened when we intentionally stopped and slowed down and took time to just be present with the girls, it was a tangible shift from what I could see. The way, all of a sudden they were honoring, all of a sudden they weren't hiding things. All of a sudden they were eager to be with us and to be kind to each other. And it's not perfect by any means, but it just shows how much of an impact we as parents have on the environment of our home, on the culture of our home, and we, for that season of time that they live under our roof, we have the responsibility to create that environment of peace and an environment where they would thrive.
So good.
Anyway,
all of that's so good. That word being present, it really stands out to me because I think that it's in that there's the secret sauce, if you will. I think no matter what, as an adult, whether every day looks very busy with responsibilities at work, I think that if you can keep that at the center of your posture, your perspective is in the moments that you are together, being present, because it's in those moments that I believe that the just random encounters, so much happens in that time. We all can speak of that. Often the enemy is sly in just the random moments. So how can we stand in being more present in those random, just in the going and the coming moments that I believe would greatly impact? One of the moments I can think of, and we're not currently in school season, but just that 10 minutes after you get your kids home from school, if they go to school, so much about what has occurred in their day gets voiced in that moment, whether vocally or body language, or emotionally. And I would say that's one of those moments that if you capitalize on that 10 minutes after school of really being present, looking them eye to eye, giving them that moment to process. Sometimes it's in the silence. Some kids, it's not all vocal, that you'll learn and know so much of how to help them navigate the next day. And being able to recognize what other pivotal moments to be present for. I know that, man, we have so much more of a road ahead of us in raising our kids, but that is something that I, if you will, plan out, is to be intentional in certain moments, because they need help navigating those things. And then in different seasons of their life, I'm just watching from an outsider, seeing how are they processing, all of those things. But, man, I think that it doesn't have to be this daunting all the time, 100%, but find those moments in your family that would be catalytic. How do you say that word? Very, very impactful.
Catalyzing or catalytic
moments,
Yep.
So.
Cadillac moments.
Cadillac moments. There you go. But I think just making yourself available. Mm-hmm. And you know what? If there's insecurity, we all navigate insecurities, and I don't know what I'm doing or how to do it or how to have this conversation, or what that's going to look like. Man, we all feel that way. But even in those moments, in relying on the Lord to help you walk through that and even kind of, trip through it a little bit, He is very faithful to show you the way. And that's simply being able to stay in the moment and feel that out and knowing that He's going to provide, even those times. So,
yeah.
I think that we can all be intimidated by cultural giants, by the things that our kids have to face. I mean, we're in the middle of this generation too, so we're facing them as well. But that can also be the lie of the enemy, that we're not able and not equipped. Kind of like the story of them spying out the land and many being intimidated by what they saw. We as parents can be super intimidated. And we have all reasons to legitimately be intimidated. But we are well able. As we rely on God, He will be faithful to us. So, and if anything, that's what our kids need to see.
Yeah.
Is not a perfect parent, is not a parent that has it figured out or has all the answers, but simply a parent that demonstrates and walks out reliance on Jesus.
Yeah.
Because Jesus is able to navigate us through any culture and any generational giants or things that happen. So I don't know. We're still in the middle of it, but that's my confidence is He's going to be faithful.
So let's get reflective for a second, and because we haven't fully, none of us have fully raised kids all the way through to adulthood.
Yeah,
I think there's things that we can draw from our experience. We're not so far along in life that we can't remember what it was like to be kids. And what were some things that we have come to value in the season of life that we're in now, that we recognize how our parents, imperfectly, yes, but in partnership with the Holy Spirit, we're able to instill things in us. And what are those things, and how can we be intentional to make sure we integrate that into our relationships with our own kids?
Something I don't want to lose track of, maybe circle back a little bit later, is the idea of spiritual fathers and mothers. And I'll say that on the front end, because I think there's some connection there to how the things I was thinking of that we were talking about a little before we pushed record, is different seasons of parenting that I was parented, certain transitions in life, and even something I've been thinking of specifically for my son, but it'll be for all of our children. But like this idea of rites of passage that was so much a part of cultural raising children, is how to transition our children from one thing to another, from one season to the next, and it not just be either unhealthily tethered to the previous season or trying to circumvent one season in order to get to the next. And so I'll kind of phrase that in the context of, we're raising our daughter's 11, and being the oldest tend to move upward in their maturity faster. They want to be older. Most kids want to be older, but the oldest specifically wants to be older, especially since all of her cousins are older, or, her closest cousins are all older than her. And her body has matured a little faster. I was a late bloomer, so I'm just tell my son, I'm sorry. you might be short for a while longer. I don't know. We can circumvent seasons by trying to grow up too fast, or, when some of our like older children, in order to get their way, sometimes they'll revert to being more childish than their age. Well, I remember different key moments as my older teenage years and then young adulthood of kind of having semi rites of passage, not formal ceremonies, but important thresholds crossing. And I remember my parents changing the way they parented me in those seasons.
Yeah.
And one of the things I value in my parents, and maybe it was just unique to me, I don't know if it was just how they raised all of us, me and my siblings, but I know my parents, they parented me towards independence, not too early, but by the time I was a teenager, their parenting shifted to give me more independence, but train me for that. Not let go, not let me do whatever. Oh no, there was very strict rules, but it wasn't a clinging type. They were just holding on to me as a child. And so I had different transitions where, the summer in between my junior and senior year, I was out of my house for like 9 weeks. That whole summer, I went from a basketball camp, came home the next day, was on a plane for New York, where I was at Princeton for a little over a month. I flew straight from there to a mission trip for 2 weeks. And then I came home, and the next week was my senior year. So I was gone almost the entire summer, and I called my dad at different times. My mom was present at different times, but as a whole, I wasn't home for a whole summer, and their parenting of me changed after that to where it was more towards independence. And then in college, very much had liberty, and my dad's relationship went through different changes in that time period where it wasn't that he was less strict, it's that the way he was parenting me was very much like, I've taught you make these decisions, here's my opinion, and you got to suffer the consequences of your own decisions. That's been making me think, okay, am I shifting gears well with my children? Am I giving specifically my son a rite of passage? He's 9 years old, going to be 10. Definitely little things, but definitely by 12, he needs to feel that sense of, I've left childhood and the teenage years. The teenager has only existed for about 100 years. There wasn't even children's clothing until like about 100 years ago. Yeah. Children wore adult clothes that looked frumpy and adult, but there was this sense where I'm growing into an adult. And just even something as simple as children's clothing has made us idealize childhood and making our children feel so unique, which I think there's a lot of positives to that. I mean, I'm not advocating for getting rid of children's clothing, but just things that happen that now it's like the glorification of youthfulness in our culture, that the only value you have is your youthfulness. Yeah. That is the complete opposite of what historically human value systems have valued. You value the elder among you. Now we despise the elder. They're in the way. Let's send them off to Florida or a home because they're in the way. And let's pretend with makeup and surgery all the way up until we can't pretend anymore. All that's making our teenage, it's the juvenilization of our culture, to where teenager, like being a teenager, a child in a semi-adult body is what's being put as the ideal. And your daughter is there. Our daughter's right there. My son's not too far behind. And I've been thinking, okay, this isn't the same as when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, there wasn't such thing as cell phones. So, and in my teenage years were a little different than my parents' teenage years. So how are we going to navigate this? And one of them is to start, specifically with my son, some type of rites of passage that help him start seeing the role that we have in responsibility. That's a value system that we have in our home. It's a core value. There's no way around it. My wife and I carry like one of our core values, each individually, is responsibility. So we're going to parent our children with that value. So that's been something I feel like is important to give my children, is certain kinds of clear demarcation moving from one season to another. That help them see, I recognize you're in a different place. You recognize you're in a different place than you were a year ago. Now we're going to navigate our relationship unique to this season. And I'm not going to try to bring you down. So many parents, like, they miss what it feels like to have a little kid. And so they treat their children like they're always these little kids. Or parents sometimes see their kids as kind of nuisance, so they're trying to parent them away. And I don't want that. And so that's kind of in my own reflection about my life and different seasons, different times. I could tell my parents transitioned how they were parenting me. I want to navigate each of those seasons well with my kids, which I feel like my prime time as a parent was not infants and toddlers. I think they're cute and they're sweet, and I love being a dad in that season, but that's not where my skills were best laid. I feel like this older kid, teenager, is where I feel like my wiring is a little more natural toward, to be able to converse with them, to challenge their thinking. And anyway, that's where my brain's at.
Yep.
That's good. I think that one thing that I valued about my upbringing, and something that I want to bring into my parenting, is the word available. I feel like that in all of those uncomfortable transitions in life, moving from, I'm a second born, and I didn't have this just like I'm ready to grow up fast thinking. I was probably the one that they had to tell to grow up. Not that I was like immature, but I didn't just like beg to grow up. And so I was a little
you didn't
different.
get a license the day you turned 16.
No, I didn't.
That's a clear firstborn thing.
Yeah. I think I was closer to 17 when I got my license. I didn't, I just wasn't as wired to like, I'm ready to get out of here.
By the time I was old enough, like, I was ready to move out. So that would be a big contrast between you and me. Yep.
I was just pretty much very content. I don't know. I guess that would be a word, but I value that in the right moments. Maybe that's why I shared what I shared earlier, is there was moments that I recognize the importance of feeling seen and being seen, not being lumped into the group, because, we grew up there's 5 of us. And then recognizing when I needed perspective that was the truth. So that way I didn't have to always suffer in a lie, if you will. So I valued the availability that I felt was there. Did that mean that that worked against me? I don't feel like it did. It was like just enough to where conversationally I could navigate some things. I don't know. It was right for the way maybe I was wired, or whatever. And so that is something that I try to recognize in my own family. And honestly, too, this idea of mothering, spiritual motherhood, or is I try to be attentive to anybody in a sense that I feel there's a measure of influence that I could speak into. I try not to just narrow it to just my 5 and 5 only, but try to be attentive to those around me. Not offer advice when it's not wanted, but just more be available, make myself a safe place, to be able to recognize little adjustments that would make the road a little bit easier. Not easy for easy's sake, but why go down a dark pit if you don't have to? So I really valued that from the way I was raised. And I think that just like I can see in my 5 kids, there's going to be strengths and weaknesses in each one of them. So the way I engage in mothering them is going to be interpreted differently. When they're talking about me one day, I'm sure some of them are not going to appreciate some of the things that I did, where others could have taken it, in more of a positive light. So I recognize that too, that is my experience. And I'm in the middle of, doing it the best that I know how. But I think that was certainly one of the things I valued, and what that looked like by example was just in the exploration of simply my spiritual journey with the Lord. As you reach certain ages where all these things, but then at what point, I think it's different for everyone, that God has to become real to you. And I just remember very pivotal moments of going to youth and doing all the things I knew to do. But when God became real to me, and being able to navigate conversations around the presence of God and having habits that are healthy habits. I remember walking through again, just dark seasons or seasons where I did feel a little bit more confused, and being able to talk those things out and not be seen as crazy or weird, but be able to see the truth on the other side. So mine was a lot in my head, that I was thankful that I didn't have an absent parent, because that would have been really detrimental to me, I feel like. Yeah. So, and then also the good encouragement of it's time to grow up, or it's time to, shave your legs, that kind of stuff. So it's time to know how to take care of yourself. So just telling myself there, it's okay to, wear makeup, please, those kinds of things. So it's
funny.
Anyway, I don't know.
I'm reflecting on, and this thought may, help us kind of wrap up this conversation, but, we all grew up in basically this same generation, millennials. Yeah. I'm maybe, me and Jacob are maybe on the older end of that, and you're kind of maybe right in the middle of it. But the thing that I think does tend to mark our generation is this idea that we tend to be very cause driven. Mm-hmm. We tend to be very purpose driven. I think there was a ton of emphasis growing up in our home, but even in the church, around how we have a purpose and a calling. So good. As a positive thing that I think I gleaned as somebody growing up, even in school, having a sense of life has meaning, and I have a purpose, I have a calling.
You're connected to something bigger.
I'm connected to something bigger. That was something that I think was greatly emphasized, and I'm seeing a lack of that. And I think the temptation we have to be careful of is to not fall into the trap of having a highly critical perspective of the next generation, because that was so much of of what we felt even growing up as millennials is like, oh, they're just lazy, they're useless, like all this other stuff that would kind of come out, because like we didn't want to do meaningless, like pointless jobs that didn't, like there was so much put into us that, hey, you have the power.
There's something big on the inside of you.
There's something big. And so when we try to live that out and then we're getting squashed because like we don't want to like grind our nose to the grindstone for nothing. Yeah. And we want to work for a place that is making an impact. Like when those things start to come out, and it's almost like a challenge to the previous generation of like you've wasted your life or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the resistance down. I think it's important for us to not only see the negative about the next generation, but just try to see those things that are valuable and to emphasize the value, and not just in a cultural way, but in a spiritual way. Like I think that's that sense of spiritual parenthood that we have to, as a church, like look towards the next generation and pray about, like, what vision do we need to be handing off to them? Yeah. How do we inspire them to get this vision of the kingdom of God, and how they are active participants in bringing that about, and how do we share this, and not in a way where we're just laying burdens and rules and things on them, but in a way that gives meaning to their life.
That's good.
That's something that I think I had, that I greatly benefited from growing up, is parents who knew that my life meant something and that I was there for a reason and a purpose, and they would call that out over and over, time after time. And I want to be intentional about doing that for my children, and not just fluffing them up and building up their ego, because I think that was the other, like the downside of that, positive message or whatever. It's like, you in and of yourself are so special, and like this overemphasis on the self, and like is where it kind of got corrupted into this like self-actualization, self-identity, like the world has to shape itself around me because I'm and so, but I'm balancing that with the truth that we know through Scripture, like empowering our children with the truth and the confidence that they can step into that season of that next season of life, whether it's young adult, with the tools that they need to thrive. I think that's really important. Any final thoughts? Because we're over an hour on this recording already. This conversation is like, it could go so many different ways. Yeah. So it's really big. It's hard to keep it focused, but it's so important as well. Like that we even be thinking this way. Yeah. That it's our life. We're at a place where it's no longer about what can we get done in the time that we have. Yeah. It's so vital that we're investing in that next generation to keep moving things forward. Yeah.
I think that just one final thought is, we had this conversation the other day about where you used to depend upon the elders to pass down knowledge, like you have knowledge at your fingertips at all times. And so it is a confusing message, that where you used to sit around and listen to stories to learn and to glean, and things were passed on, that I just think that my final thoughts in this is that being able to not feel intimidated with the information that's always with us, right in front of us, that can be searched in a matter of seconds, but give this generation a living faith, demonstrating the power of a living God, and that in that, no matter where you are in your parenting journey, no matter where your kids are in their journey, but being able to show them, maybe through all different kinds of means, a living faith, and that God is real and he can be relied on and depended upon, because that will be lost if we're not able to pass that on. That's not something you search on Google and find your answers to. But it has to be demonstrated.
Our culture is full of knowledge, but severely lacking in wisdom.
Yeah,
and that's what we get
good.
from our elders. That's the role, like the lived experience of people who have been here for a long time.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important for us to instill that value for wisdom in the next generation, where it's not just about what you know, it's about how you live.
Yeah. That integration piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
It's good stuff.
I like it.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think just to my at least final thoughts on this episode about this particular content, we started the conversation just talking about a calling, having a calling to parenthood, and that's what I want. I want my children specifically to know that they may be able to search for knowledge, but they can trust that the wisdom they would receive from me is in the context of a loving relationship. That I want to, yes, I need to discipline. Yes, I need to bring correction. I do need to bring knowledge, and I need to give them wisdom, but it's within the context of a loving relationship. Mm-hmm. It's the truth in love, so to speak, that I want to give my children. And then I want, if I can do that, I want that to overflow to others. I want to be an elder to people that maybe not have had a dad, or maybe they had a dad that raised them one way, but was lacking in the spirit or the presence of God. I want to give that gift to whoever would receive that.
Right.
And I've fallen short on that a lot, messed that up in a lot of ways. But that is what I desire with wisdom, is to not just give knowledge, not just to give information to people, but to be a source of wisdom within the context of a loving relationship, and to some be a spiritual dad that need that, because truthfully, there just aren't a lot of spiritual fathers right now. And I don't know why that is exactly, but as a pastor, I'm thinking, how do I not lose that? How do I activate spiritual fathers and mothers that can be for people what they may have lost or lacked in their natural parents, or to just continue to build on what their natural parents gave them, and be a community that is supportive to others, because we also, our kids have peers that are in single parent homes that need support and help, that are in difficult and challenging circumstances, that we can be a source of encouragement and a love, and maybe not correction, but a relationship that can be supportive to them. I want to at least keep that part of the calling is to what I know I'm supposed to give to these 5 little humans, at least be available to give to others.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something from it, or if you feel like, hey man, we need more on this topic, please let us know. Leave a comment, leave us a rating or review. We love to get those. We appreciate everybody who has stuck with us through this season. The next episode will be our final episode of this season. We will probably be dropping a couple bonus episodes later on, but we are coming to the end of season 3. Can you guys believe it?
Wow.
One more episode left. We don't actually know what the topic's going to be yet. Otherwise, I would tease it right now. But I'm sure it'll be good, and we can't wait to have you join us for the next one.